Have you ever met someone who talks about doing big things, who dreams loudly, who promises themselves the world, but somehow they never take the first step? Not because they're stupid, not because they lack talent. In fact, most of the time, they're above average in intelligence. They think deeply, they see clearly, they imagine intensely. Yet when the moment comes to act, they freeze. They hesitate, they delay, and eventually, they do nothing. People call them lazy, but the truth is much more complicated, much more psychological, much more human. This video isn't about judging them. It's about understanding their mind, how they think, why they act the way they do, and why some of the most ambitious people in the world are the least likely to start. Because behind almost every lazy, ambitious person, there is a story, a pattern, a wound, a fear, a belief system. And once you understand it, you realize something important. Laziness is rarely about energy. It's about emotion, about identity, about protection. The first thing to understand: lazy, ambitious people rarely see themselves as lazy. They don't wake up and say, "I'm not doing anything today." Instead, their mind says, "Not yet. I'm not ready. I need to think more. I need the perfect plan. I'll start tomorrow." To them, postponing is not failure. It's strategy. It feels like preparation. It feels like they're becoming smarter, more informed, more capable. They think a lot, but this thinking is a trap, a loop, a comfortable arena where the mind feels powerful. While the body stays perfectly still, psychologists call this cognitive overvaluation, where the imagination rewards itself more than real action does. In other words, they get dopamine from potential, not progress. Potential is infinite, flawless, untouched, and because of that, it's emotionally safer than trying. Second, lazy, ambitious people protect the image of who they could be. This is one of the most powerful psychological patterns they carry. They build an internal image of a future self, a successful version of them, a brilliant version of them, a limitless version of them. And deep down, they're terrified that reality won't match the fantasy. So instead of chasing the dream, they protect it. Jung described this as the shadow potential, the version of yourself you idolize but never integrate into reality. Not because you don't want it, but because failing would destroy the identity you've built. So they prefer the safe pain of staying still over the sharp pain of real disappointment. Third, lazy, ambitious people are perfectionists disguised as procrastinators. When people hear perfectionism, they imagine clean desks, organized notes, neat checklists. But real perfectionism is emotional, invisible. A fear of being seen trying and not being good enough. Lazy, ambitious people say things like, "If I do something, I want it to be great. If I start, I need to start properly. I don't want to do it halfway." This sounds disciplined, but internally, it's fear. Fear disguised as standards. So instead of doing it imperfectly, they don't do it at all. To them, a blank page is less painful than a flawed one. Fourth, lazy, ambitious people usually grew up receiving praise for potential, not action. This is one of the most common patterns. When a child is told, "You're smart, you're talented, you're gifted, you're capable of great things," but never taught discipline, execution, and resilience. They grow into adults who believe achievement should feel natural, effortless, instant. So when reality demands struggle, they shut down. Because suddenly achievement isn't about talent, it's about discipline, about consistency, about uncomfortable repetition. And nothing kills ambition faster than the realization that success requires doing things you aren't good at yet. Fifth, lazy, ambitious people think in big visions, not small steps. They don't think, what can I do today? They think, what is the final result I want? What is the ideal scenario? What is the perfect outcome? This creates huge psychological pressure. When the only acceptable outcome is massive, the smallest action feels insignificant. So they wait for the right moment, the perfect time, the big breakthrough. But the right moment never comes, because big dreams only materialize through small, unexciting, repetitive actions. Lazy, ambitious people don't hate work. They hate small work. They hate slow progress. They hate being average at the beginning. But every master starts as a beginner, and that reality is too uncomfortable for them to accept. Sixth, lazy, ambitious people crave recognition before effort. This isn't arrogance, it's psychology. They want people to acknowledge their ideas, their vision, their intelligence, their potential, before they execute. Why? Because early validation feels like a shortcut to the feeling of success, a way to experience the emotion without doing the action. But the more praise they get for ideas, the less motivated they feel to turn those ideas into reality. Talking replaces doing. Dreaming replaces building. Ambition replaces discipline. Seventh, lazy, ambitious people are haunted by comparison. They compare their starting point to someone else's success. They compare their insecure present to their imagined future. They compare their potential to the reality of others. This comparison collapses their confidence. And when confidence collapses, effort disappears. They think, if I can't do it at their level, why start at all? This is why modern social media culture creates more lazy, ambitious people than ever. Because every day, you're exposed to 10,000 examples of finished results, but almost zero examples of the ugly process. So the mind learns to love the destination and hate the path. Eighth, lazy, ambitious people deeply believe they were meant for more. And that belief becomes a trap. It sounds positive, but it becomes an identity, a burden, a pressure to live up to something invisible. So instead of climbing step by step, they wait for a miracle, a breakthrough, an opportunity so perfect it requires no humiliation, no failure, no awkward beginning. But miracles don't come. Only days. Days where they could have done one small thing, but didn't. Lazy, ambitious people often live in a mental space that feels both painful and comfortable. A strange emotional tension where they are constantly dissatisfied, yet somehow unable to move. To outsiders, it looks simple. Just do something. Just start. Just take action. But inside their mind, it's not that simple. Because the issue isn't the task, it's the meaning attached to the task. And for them, every action carries weight. Judgment, expectation, fear. Understanding this internal world is the key to understanding why they stay stuck. Ninth, they use waiting as a psychological shield. Lazy, ambitious people don't merely wait out of laziness. Waiting gives them an illusion of control. If they wait for the right moment, then any failure can be justified. I didn't really start. I wasn't fully prepared. It wasn't the ideal time. In their mind, waiting is safer than acting, because waiting protects their identity from being tested. This is why many of them love researching, planning, and imagining timelines. It feels like movement, but it's movement inside the mind. The body, meanwhile, remains perfectly still, safe, unexposed. 10th, they experience ambition as pressure, not inspiration. Ambitious people who take action feel excitement. Ambitious people who avoid action feel weight. To a lazy, ambitious mind, ambition is not a fire, it's a burden. A constant reminder of what they aren't doing. Every dream becomes a deadline. Every desire becomes a threat. They look at their goals and instead of feeling energized, they feel judged. So they retreat into comfort, into small pleasures, into distractions, because the dream feels too heavy to carry. 11th, they underestimate the emotional cost of starting. Most people think starting takes time or energy, but for the lazy, ambitious person, starting takes identity. The moment they start, they expose themselves to the possibility of failure. Criticism, embarrassment, self-doubt. Their mind whispers, "Once I begin, I'm no longer protected. Once I try, I can't hide behind potential." So they avoid beginnings, because beginnings feel like psychological danger. This is why they say things like, "I'll start when I feel ready." But readiness never comes. Not because they aren't capable, but because they're afraid of what starting will reveal. 12th, they rely heavily on emotion instead of discipline. Lazy, ambitious minds make decisions based on feeling. If they feel inspired, they will work. If they don't, they won't. But discipline is the opposite. Discipline says, "I don't care how you feel. Do the work anyway." Lazy, ambitious people struggle because they wait for emotional permission. They wait for motivation, inspiration, alignment, clarity. And when those feelings don't come, they assume something is wrong, not realizing that the people they admire, entrepreneurs, athletes, great thinkers, rarely feel ready either. But they move anyway. Lazy, ambitious people believe successful people are driven by inspiration. But the truth is, successful people are driven by consistency. 13th, they are addicted to the fantasy of success. This is one of the most painful truths. Lazy, ambitious people spend hours imagining their future. The success, the recognition, the freedom, the wealth, the transformation, and these fantasies feel good. So good that the brain rewards them with dopamine. But dopamine without action becomes a trap. They get the emotional reward of progress. Without the real progress, over time, the imagination becomes so satisfying that reality feels dull, slow, and disappointing. Why build something slowly in the real world when you can experience it instantly in your mind? But this creates a devastating problem. The more they fantasize, the less motivated they feel to act. Because action is slow. Action is imperfect. Action is boring. Action breaks the fantasy. 14th, they are terrified of losing their comfort identity. Lazy, ambitious people don't usually see themselves as weak. They see themselves as waiting, preparing, thinking. But deeper than that, they see themselves as someone meant for more. This identity gives them comfort. It gives them pride. It gives them self-respect. But the moment they start taking action, this identity becomes threatened. Because reality will test them. Reality will humble them. Reality will demand proof. So they delay action to protect the comforting story of who they could be. This is why many talented people plateau early in life. Because staying where they are feels safer than discovering their limits. 15th, they secretly fear that effort won't change anything. This is not laziness. This is hopelessness disguised as laziness. Inside their mind, a voice whispers, "What if it doesn't work? What if you try and nothing changes? What if you put in all this effort and still fail?" This voice kills momentum. because it convinces them that effort is pointless, unless success is guaranteed. But success is never guaranteed, and because their mind can't accept uncertainty, they choose inaction, not because they don't care, but because failure feels emotionally catastrophic. They would rather fail by not trying than fail by giving their best, because the second one hurts more. 16th, they think too far ahead, and it paralyzes them. Lazy, ambitious people don't fear the next step. They fear the 10th step. Before starting, they think, what if I can't maintain it? What if it gets too hard? What if I burn out? What if I lose everything later? They mentally simulate every worst-case scenario until the fear becomes heavier than the desire. They overwhelm themselves by trying to solve problems they don't even have yet. So instead of taking one small step, they freeze. 17th, they misunderstand consistency. Lazy, ambitious people believe consistency means waking up early, grinding daily, never missing a day, always being motivated. But real consistency is much simpler. It's doing something often enough that quitting is no longer the default. It's ugly. It's repetitive. It's imperfect. Lazy, ambitious people think consistency requires intensity, but it actually requires humility. Starting small, starting poorly, starting without pride. Something their mind resists deeply. Number 18th, they don't realize they're stuck in self-preservation mode. Everything they do, delaying, waiting, overthinking, fantasizing, is the mind trying to protect itself, protecting identity, protecting ego, protecting worth, protecting imagined potential. Lazy, ambitious people aren't lazy. They are defending a fragile image that they're afraid reality will break. But the irony is this: the longer they protect the image, the weaker it gets, and the harder it becomes to act. Their ambition turns into anxiety. Their dreams turn into pressure. Their potential becomes a cage. 19th, they don't lack ambition. They lack emotional safety. This is the deeper psychological truth. Action requires vulnerability. Effort requires exposure. Growth requires discomfort. Lazy, ambitious people don't avoid action because they're irresponsible. They avoid action because they don't feel safe enough to fail. If you grew up being judged harshly, if you learned that mistakes lead to punishment, if you learned that effort is never enough, your adult brain will avoid effort completely. Not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system thinks effort equals danger. So the mind protects you by shutting down ambition whenever it becomes too real. And lastly, number 20, they live between two selves, the dreamer and the avoider. Inside every lazy, ambitious person are two versions. The version who imagines the ideal life and the version who is terrified to build it. These two selves fight endlessly, every day, every hour. One says, "You're meant for more." The other says, "Stay safe." And until they reconcile these two selves, they remain stuck in a loop. Dream gives freeze, gives distract, gives regret, gives dream again, over and over and over.